welcome to Time for Health. I'm your host, Rachel Fall, and we're super happy you've joined us today to learn something healthy for yourself. So today we're talking with my friend Katie Schlagheck from the OSU Extension office. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And it is completely selfish that I asked you to be here for this topic. So we've had, I think you've been here in the past, and I think we've had some master gardeners from OSU Extension, and we've talked about preparing your garden, and we also talked about wrapping up your garden at the end of the year. So if you're interested in those topics, you can look those videos up. But we have little garden beds at home, and inevitably there comes a point in like July when the zucchini is like all over the place and crazy. So I hate waste. I don't have enough friends to give all that zucchini to. So you're here to tell us what can we do about if we've decided to start gardening? What can we do with some of the extra stuff that either we can't share or can't use right away? So what I want you to tell me is you can just wash it, chop it, put it in a baggie, and put it in the freezer, but I'm sure there's probably a little more to it than that. So you can go by vegetable, you can just go through the whole process, fruits, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, so this happens a lot, and it tends to be that late July. Their gardens tend to kind of just explode with peppers and zucchini and cucumbers, and I do get calls about certain kind of food preservation. So there's different kinds of food preservation. A lot of like canning, so water bath and pressure canning, but the easiest one is freezing. And so that's what I'm going to talk a little bit more today. It is kind of the fastest, easiest way to kind of save your produce. A couple different ways you can do it, but essentially you can just wash them, chop them, and freeze them. A little bit more to that though. So not all fruits and vegetables freeze the same. A lot of them, if they have high water content, don't freeze so well. So if you freeze them and then you thaw them, they kind of just get to mush or just don't freeze well. So always good to kind of look up to see if things can be frozen or not. The National Center for Home Food Preservation. The National Center for Home Food Preservation is a website, and they have a lot of information on specific fruits and vegetables, whether you want to freeze or can or dry or anything you want to do. So that is where I always direct people if you really are interested. It is through the University of Georgia Extension. And also all of their things are tested from the USDA. So all of their information has been tested and vetted and great. So kind of the first thing is picking them at a good time. So you don't want them too mushy or not like ripe enough, so kind of picking at the peak of their ripeness. And then the thing is called blanching. Have you ever heard of blanching?
You have.
I have,
no idea what that means.
Yeah,
so blanching. Hot water, but I don't know.
It does, So blanching is a process, and it involves either boiling hot water, or you can also steam blanch. But the boiling water is the most common and probably the easiest. So blanching is essentially a process that stops enzyme growth within vegetables. Fruits usually aren't blanched, but most vegetables are. So that's essential because it will stop that enzyme growth. If you don't blanch, then your things just kind of continue to grow. Blanching kind of stops that process, so it gives you good color, good texture, good flavor. So the process is pretty easy. You get boiling hot water. Usually you have kind of a basket that you would put your vegetables in. You dunk them in the hot water, wait for it to boil again, and then you time. So your recipe will tell you a lot of things I looked up. You blanch from anywhere from 1 to 3 minutes. So your recipe will tell you how long. And then once your time is over, you immediately take them out and you dump them in ice cold water. So you want to cool them off as quickly as possible. You might need to add ice cubes to your water, cool them down. They say that under blanching is worse than not blanching at all. Because if you under blanch, then it kind of activates that enzyme, and you want to not do that. Then you're really going to lose that flavor, that color, that texture, that taste. So blanching is really important to kind of stop that.
So pot of boiling water.
Pot of boiling water.
Pot of cold water or sink of cold water or something. Put them in a basket. wait till it boils, do whatever time, look it up, kind of Google it or look up on that website how long you need to blanch it, and then right away in the cold water.
Exactly.
And then you can chop it.
And then once they've cooled, then you chop them and do your freezing process.
Okay.
So blanching, very interesting process.
Couple steps, but I think I can manage
It's pretty
that.
easy. Like I said, you also can steam blanch, but that's not as common. So that is essentially blanching.
So I have done, so that would work for zucchini, tomatoes.
Yeah, so some
green beans.
don't have to be, tomatoes are one that don't have to be blanched.
Okay.
But a lot of vegetables do. And once you look up kind of your recipe from that website, it'll tell you how long and which ones need to be.
I have frozen, I have chopped up zucchini before, again, because you have so much, and you can only eat so much zucchini bread. Also, so I've chopped it up and I didn't blanch it, but I chopped it up and I froze it. And then when you thaw it out to make zucchini bread, it is much more watery.
Yes.
So I had to kind of learned by mistake to kind of drain a little, not all of it, but a little bit of the extra water out to do it. So
yeah, and a lot of times, things unfree or when they thaw, that water content, and so that's why some things freeze better than others.
Okay. So would it be better if I wanted to save chopped zucchini to blanch it, then like shred it and freeze it?
So there is a recipe for chopped and for shredded.
Okay.
So it's a little bit different whether you're doing chopped or shredded.
Okay.
Yeah.
And some of those things you can save for soups
Exactly.
and all that kind of stuff. Okay.
And sometimes even in those recipes it tells you best to use in a soup or just raw.
Because it doesn't maintain its
that texture.
Beautiful July tomato texture. It just doesn't stay. Now you said tomatoes you don't necessarily have to blanch. You can
so the recipe,
wash them, chop them, and freeze them.
So the recipe I looked at for tomatoes, it said if you're just doing raw tomatoes, just wash them, boil them to loosen their skins.
Okay.
Take the skin off, core them. And then freeze them whole or in pieces with a little bit of space at the top of your container because when things freeze, they expand. So you don't want your lid to pop off.
Yeah.
And then those are ones that they suggest only using for cooking or seasoning, as tomatoes are not really solid when they're thawed.
Yeah.
So especially taking the skins off really kind of hampers that as well.
So you said, how do you get the skin? Boil them
Boil
to take
them.
the skin
It
off?
And the skin, and then it's easier
it
to get
comes
that
off. And
off.
core them, take the seeds out, or just cut them and
or just cut them.
Okay.
Yeah.
And freeze them.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Thus far, I'm not sure I've done anything right, but that's okay.
Really, there's no wrong or right. But just experimenting.
And so you can look up on the website. So green beans would be the same thing. Kind of blanch them, and then you can freeze those whole or cut them up.
So green beans would be pretty much the same. So those would be blanched. In the recipe, it says to wash them, cut off the ends of them, blanch them for 3 minutes. So boil them for that 3 minutes, and then cool them immediately. Drain all that water out, and then give them a little bit of. They call it head space. It's the space between the food and the top of your lid.
Okay.
Because things expand when they freeze. And just seal them and freeze them.
Okay.
Things with green beans. So when we talk about freezing, there's kind of 2 different ways you can freeze. So a lot of people will just freeze in a container. We suggest really hard plastic containers. So you wouldn't want to freeze anything in like your leftover butter dish or leftover it's really that thinner plastic. So really we suggest jars and things that are this really thick plastic made for freezing, or
not
like
Ziploc
freezer bags.
A freezer
Ziploc bag would be fine. So you can freeze in a container, or you can tray freeze. And so green beans would be one that would be probably good as a tray freeze. So really it's pretty easy. You just do a thin layer of whatever you're wanting to freeze on a cookie sheet.
Yeah.
And if you have space in your freezer, put it in your freezer until they're frozen, and then add them into a bag. And so that way things freeze individually instead of all clumping together.
Yeah.
So a lot of times with fruit, people will do that. Strawberries, so you get individual strawberries instead of one big clump of strawberries when you go to take them out. So that's really pretty easy if you have the space to do that.
So
in your
you don't
freezer.
store them long term on the tray.
No, you wait
freeze
till they
them
freeze.
until they're frozen individually, and then you can container or baggie and freeze them.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really smart because they do clump together.
They do, yes. And depending on what you're wanting to use it for. So sometimes it doesn't matter if you're just dumping all your vegetables into a soup or a smoothie. It doesn't really matter. But if you just want like a handful of things at a time, it's much easier just to get them instead of clumping them all together.
What about like kale or spinach? Lettuce doesn't freeze, but kale. I've done kale. I've tried. I've washed it, chopped it, and frozen it in a baggie.
Yeah. So you can. One of the things I looked up was about cabbage, which is pretty similar. And you can, they say, to wash it and do it, kind of pick off larger sections, like leaf by leaf almost. And then you can pack them together and freeze them. But with that, water content of kale, cabbage, lettuce itself, sometimes when it thaws, it's not going to look the same. It's going to be wilty.
It wouldn't be necessarily used for a salad necessarily, but
you could probably in a soup or a stew or smoothies.
I do.
Yeah.
Heck yeah. Green smoothies.
Yes.
Raspberries, like use kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Blanch.
So for fruit, most fruits you do not blanch. Otherwise, they'll kind of just get put to mush.
Oh,
if you're boiling.
Sure.
So any kind of fruit, you're not really going to blanch. Raspberries, wash them. With fruit, you can do a couple different ways. You can just do them as is. You can also do a sugar pack. So you would add, I know, it sounds great.
Yeah.
Adding so much sugar for however many berries you have. And there's a recipe that tells you that ratio. And just kind of stirring that sugar in with your berries until it's dissolved and then freezing them.
Okay.
You can also do a syrup pack. So different ways, and it tells you how to make a certain level of syrup. So they have percentages, like a heavy syrup, a medium syrup, and a light syrup, depending. And so including that syrup, mixing until it's all mixed in, and then freezing as well. So really it's just preference and what you're going to use it for as well. Yeah.
Like over top of your ice cream,
exactly. Yes. And with those, of course, you also, if doing in a container, always leave that space as well at the top. Yeah.
Okay. Any last thoughts about preserving all these beautiful fruits and vegetables?
Like I said, it's a great way. If you have the freezer space, it's probably the most economic, so it doesn't cost a lot to do because you already have that excess, so you're not buying anything extra.
Right.
If you have that freezer space, if you have containers already, so it's really pretty economical. So it's just one way to preserve your food. If people are very interested in canning their fruits and vegetables, it's a whole other topic.
It is.
But we have information on our website.
You do. You've done a variety of webinars and different things about canning and preserving.
At OSU Extension, we have a whole team just for food preservation, and they've done videos and all sorts of things if people are interested. To look those up.
Maybe
from
someday I'll
OSU.
Graduate to that.
Yes, it is a process for sure. We also have resources at our office if people are interested. Go ahead and give me a call. We have things for purchase, books, different things like that. Or just if you have questions, go ahead and give me a call, and I'm happy to answer.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie.
No problem.
All right, there you go. You got extra fruits and vegetables. Now you know how to save them. You can always share them, of course, but now you know how to save them for future use. So whether it's useful for you, or you can share this information with people you know and love, go right ahead. That's why we're here. So until we meet again, I encourage you to make time for health.